Good evening. We are looking at a story tonight that fundamentally challenges our understanding of national security, executive privilege, and the constitutional boundaries between the White House and the Pentagon. If you have been following the headlines, you know there is a narrative forming, but to truly grasp the magnitude of what has occurred, we have to strip away the noise and look at the raw intelligence and the timeline of events. We are talking about a sequence of military and political maneuvers that began in the hallways of the Defense Department and culminated in a daring, controversial, and highly classified raid on the streets of Caracas, Venezuela. This is not just a story about a military operation. It is a story about how the machinery of the American government functions, or fails to function, under extreme pressure. Let's begin with the event that has intelligence communities around the world scrambling. We now have confirmation through leaked Justice Department memos of an event that many thought was impossible, or at least highly improbable. On January 3, 2026, the United States military executed a covert operation of massive geopolitical significance. At exactly 2 a.m., a force of 200 Special Operations troops infiltrated Caracas. The timing here is critical to understand. Military planners call this the witching hour for a reason. It is the deepest part of the night, where human alertness is at its absolute lowest, and in this specific case, the operation was timed to coincide with Venezuelan military holiday leave. This wasn't a random decision. It was a calculated move to strike when the defensive manpower of the target was significantly depleted. The objective was singular and startlingly ambitious: the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. And according to these leaked documents, that is exactly what happened. They were apprehended and flown directly to New York City to face trial. Now, usually, an operation of this scale, invading the airspace of a sovereign nation, neutralizing air defense systems at La Carlota Air Base and Fort Tiuna, and extracting a head of state, would be preceded by weeks of congressional debate, or at least confidential briefings to the Gang of Eight, the top leadership in Congress. That did not happen. And this brings us to the core constitutional crisis brewing in Washington. The most shocking aspect of this entire saga isn't necessarily the raid itself, but the silence that surrounded it. Not a single member of Congress was notified. No committee chairmen were briefed. The legislative branch of the United States government found out about this operation the same way you and I did, after the fact, through leaks and breaking news. To understand the gravity of this, we need to look at the justification provided by the administration. Marco Rubio, serving as Secretary of State, offered a defense that essentially rewrites the compact between the intelligence community and Congress. Rubio argued that the administration bypassed the legislative branch because they feared Congress would leak the information and jeopardize the mission. Let's analyze that for a moment. The executive branch is claiming that the constitutional requirement for oversight is null and void if they believe Congress cannot keep a secret. This is a massive expansion of executive power. It suggests that if the White House deems the risks too high, they can unilaterally decide to cut Congress out of the war-making loop entirely. However, there is a deep irony in Rubio's justification. The administration was worried about Congress leaking, yet the details we are discussing right now didn't come from Congress. They came from the Department of Justice. They came from inside the Pentagon. The leaks that exposed the operational details of this raid originated from the very executive institutions that carried it out. The secrecy argument, when held up to the light of scrutiny, begins to disintegrate. Now I want to pivot to the technological aspect of this story, because this is where the details get truly unprecedented. The leaked memos describe the deployment of a specific asset, a weapon known as the discombobulator. I know how that sounds. It sounds like something from a piece of fiction, but we need to treat this with the seriousness the documentation demands. This is described as an advanced sonic weapon, a piece of technology designed to bridge the gap between kinetic warfare, bullets and bombs, and electronic warfare. According to the reports, this device was used to disable Venezuelan air defense systems and neutralize opposition forces without leveling the city. Eyewitnesses on the ground in Caracas reported Venezuelan troops exhibiting signs of sonic injuries, disorientation, balance issues, and an inability to operate their equipment. Donald Trump, speaking to the New York Post, was incredibly candid about this capability. He stated that the weapon made enemy rockets simply not work. He described a scenario where Venezuelan forces were pressing buttons, attempting to engage their defense grids, and the systems were simply dead. This brings us to a major security concern that intelligence experts are raising this morning. This technology, this discombobulator, was a classified state secret. It represents a technological edge that the United States held over its adversaries. By detailing its effects to a newspaper, Donald Trump essentially confirmed the existence and the capabilities of a classified weapon system to the world. From a strategic standpoint, this is a nightmare for military planners. The moment you reveal a secret weapon, your adversaries begin working on a countermeasure. By bragging about the efficacy of this sonic technology, the administration may have inadvertently signaled to Russia, China, and Iran exactly what they need to harden their systems against in the future. It is a classic case of short-term political posturing causing long-term strategic damage. But this raid did not happen in a vacuum. We have to zoom out and look at the broader context of what is happening at the Pentagon. Leading up to this operation, there was a systematic cleaning of the house within the Department of Defense. Mark Esper, the Defense Secretary, was fired. He was replaced, along with several other top Pentagon officials, by individuals viewed as loyalists to Donald Trump. Why does this matter? Because personnel is policy. Mark Esper was known to be resistant to some of the more aggressive moves the administration wanted to take, particularly regarding the rapid withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan and Syria. By removing Esper and installing loyalists, the administration effectively removed the internal brakes at the Defense Department. Military and intelligence experts are sounding the alarm because this purge at the Pentagon removed the dissenting voices that might have questioned the wisdom of a raid like the one in Venezuela. It removed the people who might have insisted on notifying Congress. When you strip away the independent thinkers and replace them with people who will simply say yes, you clear the path for high-risk operations, but you also remove the safety rails that prevent strategic disasters. This is all happening against a backdrop of a chaotic transition period. The administration has refused to cooperate with the transition team of Joe Biden. We are seeing reports that intelligence briefings are being withheld. On Capitol Hill, the alarm is bipartisan, though quiet. Some Republicans are stepping up, stating that if Joe Biden does not start receiving the presidential daily briefing, the highly classified summary of national security threats, by Friday they will intervene. Why is that briefing so important? Because national security does not pause for an election. If a new administration comes in blind, without knowing about operations like the Venezuela raid or the capabilities of weapons like the discombobulator, the United States becomes vulnerable. The enemies of the country do not care who is sitting in the Oval Office. They care about exploiting the gap between administrations. Meanwhile, the domestic political landscape is just as volatile. The Trump campaign is continuing to pursue a scorched earth legal strategy regarding the election results. In Georgia, they are reviewing every single ballot by hand. In Pennsylvania, the lawsuits continue to pile up. It is important to look at the math here to understand the reality versus the rhetoric. In Georgia, Joe Biden leads by approximately 14,000 votes. Historically, recounts change the tally by a few hundred votes at most. The gap is simply too wide for a standard recount to bridge. Yet, the narrative of fraud persists. Critics argue that this is about sowing discord and sowing division. They argue that by dragging out the process and refusing to concede, the administration is doing the work of foreign adversaries like Russia and Iran, who benefit when American democracy looks unstable. However, supporters argue that this is about confidence, that reviewing every ballot is necessary to ensure the electorate trusts the system. But when you juxtapose this domestic legal battle with the foreign policy actions we just discussed, a pattern emerges. We are seeing an administration that is acting with unchecked aggression on the international stage while simultaneously challenging the institutions at home. The raid in Venezuela and the refusal to brief the incoming administration are two sides of the same coin. They both represent a rejection of the traditional norms that have governed the American presidency for decades. Let's circle back to the central theme here: oversight. The architects of the American Constitution designed a system of checks and balances specifically to prevent exactly what we are seeing. They gave Congress the power to declare war and fund the military so that no single person could treat the armed forces as a personal tool. When an administration bypasses Congress, claims the right to use secret weapons without disclosure, and purges the Pentagon of dissenting voices, they are testing the tensile strength of that Constitution. The capture of Nicolás Maduro may be sold as a victory against a dictator. The use of the discombobulator may be sold as a triumph of American innovation. But the cost of these victories was the process itself. We are left with a series of uncomfortable questions. If the government can launch a secret invasion without telling Congress, what else can they do? If classified weapons are revealed in newspaper interviews, what secrets are actually safe? And if the Pentagon is staffed entirely by loyalists who refuse to cooperate with an incoming administration, who is actually watching the watchmen? As we move forward, we need to keep our eyes on the fallout. We need to see how the international community reacts to this raid. We need to see if Congress attempts to reclaim its oversight authority. And we need to see if the judicial challenges in Georgia and Pennsylvania yield any actual evidence, or if they continue to serve merely as a backdrop of confusion. This story is far from over. The raid in Caracas was just one move on a very complicated chessboard, and we are only just beginning to understand the rules of the game this administration is playing. Stay vigilant, because the definition of normal is being rewritten in real time.